Hey guys, Sandro here from Carcraft Auto Detailing in Melbourne. Today is a review of CARPRO's newest coating in the form of CQuartz UK 3.0. Now, rather than just regurgitating the information that any of you can find by just googling this product or jumping onto CARPRO's website, I want to share in this video some diverse and useful information about it to better help understand this new coating from an application perspective to how it's come about and what you can actually expect from the results, rather than just taking for granted that CARPRO's claims of results and usability are laws. I actually first got my hands on this product quite a while back as a new prototype coating before it was released, but had no idea what it would be called or where it would sit in the CQuartz coating lineup. All I was told about it is that it had been engineered to work better in hotter climates, and as it was summer here in Melbourne when I first tried it, it actually lived up to those claims. It was about 2 to 3 months later that it was actually released, and I discovered that it would be replacing my much used and loved CQuartz UK, which honestly left me with mixed feelings and a few unanswered questions. Now, being that the original CQuartz UK was developed to work in somewhat extreme colder climates, and this new version seemed to be developed to also work in hotter climates, it just seemed strange to call it UK 3.0, as it really wasn't specifically geared to UK's colder weather. In any case, I may be wrong, but it just didn't seem to be an update or formula tweak, as much as it seemed to be a new coating in its own right. Now, in reality, although CQuartz UK was developed for more extreme cold climates, where other existing coatings were near impossible to use, I don't think even CARPRO realised that it would become a hit all over the world in all different climates. And I also don't believe that they initially realised that with just some adaptive techniques, CQuartz UK could be used with fantastic success and extreme ease of use in hotter climates as well. The truth is that CQuartz UK had a massive role in escalating CARPRO's success, and it was really perhaps the best consumer coating on the market at the time of its release, when you take all things into consideration, which is why it was a real winner in my world. So I guess from my perspective, I would have guessed CARPRO would have kept that somewhat original formula, only perhaps tweaking it, and called this new coating something else like CQuartz CA or California, and kept both coatings that have more application-specific weather characteristics depending on colder and warmer climates. Now, a lot has happened with coatings since UK first entered the market, and I do believe that it was time to give it a tweak and perhaps look at strengthening its durability, water behaviour and chemical resistance to keep in line with some newer coatings that have entered the market in the last couple of years. But as I mentioned before, this doesn't feel like a tweaked or improved version of CQuartz UK as much as it feels like an entirely new coating. But in the end, no matter what you call it, it's results that matter, and I'll share what I've discovered about it. So let's look at some of the claims that this new version of CQuartz is meant to have over its predecessor, such as an easier application, increased gloss, better water behaviour and more chemical resistance. By now I'm sure most of you know just how temperature sensitive coatings can be. So I really wanted to wait until winter hit here in Melbourne before passing judgment on this coating and doing this video. So that way I had experience with it in both hotter and colder climates. And for those of you that don't know, Melbourne is a Bermuda Triangle of weather where it can be well below zero and up to 50 degrees Celsius at times, and we tend to get all seasons of weather to some extent every day. So is the application easier? From an objective point of view, I'd have to say yes and no. The main reason it's easier to apply is due to its more forgiving chemistry that actually gives you a lot of latitude when wiping or leveling down the coating, in that it's quite forgiving if you do wait a couple of minutes or if you immediately wipe it off in most normal weather conditions. Now, it has been recommended to be used as a wipe on and wipe off product where you don't need to wait or worry about flashing times, which I've found to be mostly true. But at the same time, although it's not entirely necessary, if you adapt your technique a little to the weather conditions, you will find it to be a better process in giving it 30 seconds in warmer climates and a couple of minutes in colder climates before wiping it down. You'll also find in most cases that you need an extra wipe or two to completely level it down with your cloths. One tip I'll add that seems to work great is to do your normal wipe down where it looks relatively perfect, and then do a final wipe about 30 seconds later, as it seems to stop the coating from smearing as it would if you continuously keep on wiping. Something that became quite apparent is how 3.0 was slightly easier and smoother to wipe down when I initially tried it in the summer months. However, it was the complete opposite once the colder months hit, and I could feel it was much more grabby and resistant to wipe in that colder climate. And the main issue that I observed with this new formulation that only came about in the colder climate was its tendency to noticeably thicken and become cloudy as the weather dropped below 10 degrees. Now, I have seen this happen to a few other coatings, but never with the original CQuartz UK. In any case, if you try to apply the coating when it's in this somewhat viscous state, you'll find that it just applies way too thick. It'll be a real nightmare to remove, and you may see some cloudiness in the finish. What's happening is that the specific carrier solvents are starting to solidify and can no longer aid the active quartz or silica content in providing a nice, thin, even application and distribution of the coating. As I'm sure many detailers that regularly apply coatings will know, you can solve this issue by simply dropping the coating bottle into some warm water for about 10 to 15 minutes and then giving it a gentle but thorough shake, which in most cases will restore the coating's correct consistency and even solvent distribution. It also won't really matter in most cases if the paint or car panels are also quite cold, as long as the coating itself has the right consistency. And another tip I'll offer is to keep the coating in your pocket or hand as you coat the car, as it'll stop it from returning back to that viscous state. But with that aside, and all things considered, for someone that's never applied a coating, CQuartz UK 3.0 is perhaps the easiest and most forgiving coating to work with, as long as you do understand the points I've just covered. In simple terms, although you may find it more grippy to wipe off, especially in colder climates, the truth is that it's great for beginners that struggle with flashing times that you really don't need to worry about with this coating compared to most others. And lastly, in 90% of cases, it's really not a finicky coating that requires expert understanding or any specific techniques, as I actually found that when applying this coating on test panels that weren't in the best condition, UK 3.0 still works surprisingly well, was extremely forgiving and basically just worked. So the next thing claimed about 3.0 is the increased gloss and better water behaviour. Now, apart from applying it to actual cars, I also did some side-by-side test comparisons with the original version on some test panels. As far as gloss is concerned, it was hard to see an obvious difference. But having said that, I always thought that the original UK looked fantastic, so it's not like it was a real issue or deal breaker. But if I had to answer either yes or no as to it looking better, I would actually say that it is perhaps a touch glossier, but in any case, it's at least as good, if not better. The next thing, which is always important with any coating, is water behaviour or its hydrophobic and hydrophilic properties. So, does it create beautiful pearl-like water beads, and does it sheet water cleanly and rapidly? This is important because it's a clear visual indication of how well it will repel environmental contamination, as well as its ability to self-clean the paint when it rains and is washed. Again, it's not like a day and night difference to the old formulation, but when you're able to see the new and the old formulations side by side, it really does appear that 3.0 is an improvement in that area, and a definite step in the right direction. The water does in fact sheet off the paint a little cleanly and quicker, and if you have a look at the contact angle of the water beads, they also sit at improved angles to the surface of the paint. So lastly and importantly is chemical resistance that to some extent relates to the durability in the real world. Now for those of you that have seen my wax versus sealant versus coating video, I actually tend to use a similar process when trying to assess a coating's chemical resistance and durability. This was actually perhaps the greatest or clearest difference between the two formulations. Overall, I can confidently say that U.K. 3.0 does appear to have increased resistance to chemicals compared to its predecessor, which I personally think is also the most important feature here. Overall, I found that it could take a bit more punishment when attacking it with stronger cleaning chemicals and solvents, which, as I stated, in my experience is the best way to predict its durability and longevity, which will take a few years to actually determine, but my guess, based on my experience with it so far, seems to indicate that it will have increased protection and durability. I'll also add that 3.0 is claimed to have less carrier solvents and more active quartz content, which seems to be true when assessing all the characteristics it's been displaying, and should also technically aid this coating in being a touch harder and less scratch prone, at least in theory, but hopefully also in practice. One final tip I highly suggest with this coating is to apply at least 2 coats or even 3. As from my testing so far, although a single layer is still quite good, a second layer not only displays greater water behaviour, but also displays greater chemical resistance. There really is no difference to applying additional layers, and I've found that in warmer temperatures, 45 minutes to an hour is optimal for that next layer, while in the colder weather, an hour to an hour and a half is best. And I'll just add that both panels displayed in this video had 2 layers applied. Overall, I honestly believe that this is a great coating and should be an all-round improvement on the original. Though at the same time, I still feel that there's a place for the CQuartz that we all came to know and like. I also believe that it really is a new coating in itself, but like I said, it's the results that matter, and I guess CQuartz UK built a great reputation, so that name was important to CARPRO to help market and make this new coating a success, which I'm sure it will be. I'll also add that it's not an easy task to create a true nano coating that can be applied as a wipe on and wipe off procedure with no real flash time required, and although it's not perfect, my guess is that many coatings will follow suit, as this new formulation does help bring coatings to the general public in a more predictable and fail-safe application. As always, I do really hope this video was useful and helpful to some of you guys out there. Please like, comment and subscribe to this channel to show your support for these videos, and I'll see you guys soon.